All right, I guess we'll get to it. It's 2 minutes after, and I'm assuming everybody that's coming is coming. I am still kind of surprised to see so many people still here, because usually when we record lessons, the class kind of thins out after a while because you wind up getting ramped up in homework assignments in every other class. So you take advantage of the ones that are being recorded, but I definitely appreciate you guys showing up because nothing's worse than just me and just me. Yeah, that sucks. All right, we're going to finish off where we left off last week, which was finishing off with the Tic-Tac-Toe game. Today we're going to talk about conditions and loops, so if structures, case structures, stuff like that. And then loops would be like for loops and for each and whiles and do whiles. We're going to build a little kind of like a product display thing, which gives you the ability to do filtering through it. So something a little different than a game, though I do have a game in the wings. Next week we're doing functions, so we'll be building Go Fish, which turns out to be a lot more complex than you think it would be. But yeah, anyway, so that's next week. We will also be talking about the lab today. That will be due in 2 weeks, and then we'll be talking about assignment 1. That'll be due, currently I have it scheduled for October 7th is when it's due, so it gives you quite a while to get it done and get it in. It's not huge, and most of the steps you need to abide by are already inside the file, though you can go rogue if you so choose to. If you want to build your own type of game, you can let me know, and we can approve it ahead of time. Anyways, we'll talk about that in a little bit. For now, let's see if we can knock off the rest of this Tic-Tac-Toe game. So when we're done, we should be able to play Tic-Tac-Toe and hopefully beat the opponent. No, looks like I'm going to get... Yeah, no more moves. And my mouse is gone. Why is my mouse gone? Oh, there we go. All right, having a lot of issues with my Mac. I haven't upgraded to Mojave. Has anybody actually upgraded to Mojave? Yeah? Is it okay?
Like 2 months ago.
I like to wait a little while just to make sure it's not going to completely screw with my lessons, but yeah, it's good. I have to use Xcode tools and stuff because I do a lot of Rails development and stuff, so it can't mess up my console environment. It's very important it doesn't mess up the console environment. All right. Yeah, so last week we started off with, I think we got to step 4L. The first little bit, we basically went to our DOM and we grabbed a bunch of the elements off the DOM and stored it in variables. Then we used a new method on the document that we haven't seen before called query selector all. The difference between query selector all and query selector is that query selector will grab the first instance of an element based on a selector, and query selector all will return back an array of every element it finds based on that selector. Right? So we use that to our advantage to grab the 9 cells from the Tic-Tac-Toe board and bring them back as an array of HTML node elements, which is pretty cool because now we can actually work with them as individual elements or in the array, just loop through and grab whatever we need from them. Then we created a couple of players, player 1, player 2. We created a couple of player pieces, and then we set a game state. And our game state started off at current player equals 0, right? Then, just to make things nice and easy, though, if you ever want to challenge yourself, look up magic square math and learn how to build out the magic square to detect win conditions. It's tricky, though. But we did it the easy way. We just listed the 8 win conditions that are possible in Tic-Tac-Toe. I think it's fast. I think even if you benchmarked against the magic square, it would probably still be faster because there's only 8 conditions. If you were building Sudoku, then maybe go with the magic square. But we're not building Sudoku. All right. Then we build a function called killGame. Ominous. And basically it wanders through and removes the event listener that we bound to all of our click events so that we can stop the user from being able to click the board, right? So now that this game is done, they can't click any other elements on the board because we've removed the actual event from the div. We created like a disabled effect. We add a class to it that makes it look like it's game over, and that's it. Then we created a function called evaluate board. Essentially, this is our way of detecting our win condition, right? We started off by setting a variable for board full, and basically every time we capture a win condition that's complete, or all the pieces are in the win condition, we add 1 to the board full, and then we basically see whether board full equals win condition, and if it does, then we know the board is entirely covered in pieces, and therefore there's no more moves at that point. We iterate through all the wins of the win condition. We're using Destructuring, which is an array. It's an ES5 structure, which is really cool. It allows us to take an array and essentially decouple all of the elements from the array and immediately assign them to variables. So our win condition, each win condition contains 3 elements, and what we're basically doing is taking those 3 elements and assigning them to I1, I2, and I3. And that gives us 3 variables that we can now work with. We did the same thing again a little further down when we actually go and grab the cells. We use Destructuring to assign them off to C1, C2, and C3. In step 4F, we evaluate the 3 variables. The first evaluation is we want to see if all the pieces are in place. And the way we do that is by taking a look at the C1.length, C2, and C3. If all 3 have size greater than 0, that means there is 3 pieces inside that win condition line. It doesn't mean all 3 pieces are the same. It just means that they're currently occupied, right? So we add 1 to the board full because that's met. We've met that criteria, so we add 1 to the board full, saying one of the win conditions has pieces in it entirely. Then, if we check to see whether or not all 3 pieces are the same, that's what C1 equals C2 and C2 equals C3 is doing for us. It's checking to see if all 3 pieces are identical. So all 3 pieces are X's or all 3 pieces are O's. And if they are, then we congratulate whatever current player we're working with. We kill the game, and we return false. And the reason we're returning false is because we do have a bit of a race condition with one of the events. We don't want the event to conclude without knowing the next step, and the return false helps us kind of, stop that from happening. Now, we are at the evaluate if the board is full by checking its equals the size of the win conditions array. So we're now caught up to where we ended off last week on step 4L. Before we go any further, are there any questions about the current state of our application? Anybody need any clarity on any pieces for it? So destructuring is something a little new, probably to many of you. In PHP, we have a thing called list, which is essentially like destructuring. Ruby doesn't have anything that I know of off the top of my head that is the equivalence. So destructuring is a bit new. We will be going over destructuring next week as well when we talk about functions, because we're going to be doing some very cool functions based on the ES5 syntax, as well as traditional functions. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about destructuring then and show you the power of destructuring and how it comes in handy. Destructuring is kind of unique to JavaScript, especially the syntax, so it can be a little confusing. So don't get too hung up on it. We will go over it over and over again. All right, step 4L. Evaluate if the board is full by checking if it equals the size of the win conditions array. So we're going to be using an if condition, which is helpful because today's class will be about conditionals and about loops anyways, so we're going to kind of get a little bit of a taste of it. So the condition we're writing is if board full, and we're doing a strict comparison with the triple equals. We're going to compare against the win conditions. And what method do I use to, what property do I access to tell how many elements are in an array? Yep.
Dot length.
Yep, dot length. There we go. Now that closing curly brace is actually going to come down here just below step 4P. So you might be like, okay, well the board's full, the win conditions, there's only 8 win conditions, and board full should technically have 9 elements in it, but we're not, we're cheating. We're cheating a little bit. Instead of adding each cell to board full, we're basically just detecting every time a win condition has 3 pieces in it, we add 1 to board full, right? And at the end of the, when we're done, if all 8 win conditions all have pieces in them, there's no more moves, nobody's won, and we move on, right? So we're just taking advantage of that concept. All right, step 4M. If so if the win condition is true, then we're going to inform the players the player who has won. No, that's not right. Is that right? No, that's a copy and paste error. If so, we're going to inform the players nobody has won. That's a little better. We'll change the comment a little bit. We'll use text content to overwrite the H1. No more moves. And we can be mean. Loser. Z. There we go. Why not? It's just us playing. I mean, what's programming without a little self-deprecation? All right. Now we're going to kill the game. And we have this wonderful function called kill game. Such a lovely label. There we go. We'll kill the game. That'll fire off our kill game function. And incidentally, if you forget what a function does that you wrote, which happens to us all, especially when you start dealing so far we've only written things, I think, max a couple hundred lines. But when you get into programs that are tens of thousands of lines, you're not likely going to remember what a function does. So often IDEs will support the ability to look up what that function does. So in Sublime, I can right-click and choose to go to definition, and it will jump in my file to wherever it's located, or it will open the file inside my project where that definition has been put. So it's very likely your IDE supports that. I would definitely figure out how to do it in order to look up Go definitions, because it makes life a lot easier when you start dealing with lots and lots of lines of code. All right, step 4. We are going to return false to prevent the toggle event from changing the message. So we're going to return false. And we're going to close out that if condition. That's for the, yeah, what am I doing here? Hold on, I think I missed a big, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a for loop, that's why. That's the only problem with leaving from one class to coming back to another. You forget the structure you're currently in. We're in the middle of a for loop, so we definitely do need to still close under 4p. Yeah. Or our for loop will blow up and not work. All right. Where was I? Okay, so now we need to return true. Underneath step 4p, return true. And basically that's going to happen if neither of the events have occurred. So if we haven't filled out all 3 pieces, right? So the board is not full. Nobody has won. Then we're going to return true back to our toggle event. Okay? So I can see a little bit of confusion about these return false, return trues. So let's just recap why they're in place. If I scroll up to the top where we actually do the toggle event, which is, where do I actually add the toggle? Evaluate board. Oh, we haven't actually written it yet. That's why. There we go. You're going to find out actually in 2 seconds, because we're going to write the toggle event here in 1 second. All right. So let's start the toggle event, and then I'll explain why those return trues and return falses are there. So it's function under step 5 on line 121, if you're in line with me. Toggle cell. And we're going to give it a parameter called event. You can call it literally whatever you want. Event is just pretty customary. That's what most people call it when they're using them as an event callback. It's going to create a curly brace for us, and I'm going to put the closing curly brace down on line 139 or so to close out that function. So the purpose of toggle cell, I'll show you in the finished version of the Tic-Tac-Toe game. The purpose of toggle cell is when I actually click on one of these cells, it puts a piece in it. That's its purpose. So the logic in here needs to know which player is currently playing, which piece they currently have, which cell they clicked on, and then take that piece and put it in that cell as the text content. Sounds complex, but it's actually not. Event, when we do a callback, like when we do a call with the click event, when we add an event listener, it actually provides information to our function if we give it a call, like if we give it a parameter to fill. So we're giving it a parameter called event to fill. When we actually click these cells, like so, event actually gets filled with that event that occurred. And that event object has a whole bunch of pieces of information available to us. Has information about what we clicked on, where we clicked, our mouse coordinates, tons and tons of information that you can now access from that argument, which is fantastic because that's how we're going to be able to tell what cell they clicked on, right? So let's create a variable to hold our target. So event has a property on it called target. Event.target. And target, does anybody know what target is? The dot target? Does anybody have a guess of what that property might be? When I want to hit something with a bow and arrow, right? I point at that thing at the end, and that's the target, right? And I shoot and I fling my arrow and it hits that target. It's the same thing with your mouse. Think of your mouse as a bow and arrow. And I point and aim and I hit my target. Right? The target is the thing I'm clicking on. It's the thing that the event is occurring against, right? So if I mouse over something, that event, the target is the thing I actually moused over that triggered off that whole reaction, okay? So our target will be the cell that we actually click on. All right, so step 5b, write an if condition, if target dot text content is blank, which makes sense, right? Because we don't want to try to put a piece in a place that already has a piece. I'm going to steal that closing curly brace. And I'm going to put it on, yeah, line 138, makes sense. There we go. Step 5c. Grab the player, so if the text content is blank, grab the player piece and set the target value to it. So the target value will be whatever value we want inside this cell, the text content of that cell. That's what we're going to target. All right. So that looks like right. So it's target dot text content equals, and then I want to access the player's piece of the player I'm currently using. Does anybody have any idea what the syntax might look like for that? Let's go look at our variables that we defined at the top, right? So we have our players. We have our player piece, and current player is the index number of the player we're currently working with. So two of these things will help us get the player piece that we're currently working with. That'll get us the player's name. Yeah? You figure if you throw enough stuff at it, something will stick. Yeah. So we're going to use a combination of player piece and current player. So player piece will be the array that we're working with, right? And what will current player give us? The index, exactly. It'll give us the index of that array and pull back that actual player piece. So let's scroll back down to where we're building out our toggle cell. And we're going to write player piece. And obviously, I'm not just going to type 0 in here. What am I going to type between these brackets? Spot on. There we go. Examples like this can be a bit problematic because there's so many working parts. There's so many different little pieces that have to go together in order for this application to work. What I would recommend, if you're having any difficulty with JavaScript, what I would recommend is to take a blank version of this file, start at step 1, and try to follow it yourself without looking at the finished version of it. And see if you can complete it on your own, just through using MDN and your own lookup and your own research, because it will help reinforce these concepts a lot more for you. All right, step 5D. Evaluate the board and see if the player has won or the game is over. Okay. So we're going to do if and we have a function for this, what function do we call if we want to evaluate the board? Yeah, evaluate board. The one we wrote. All right, so we're going to do if evaluate board. And I'm going to just take off that closing curly brace, and I'm going to put it on step 5F. Which, there we go. So now you should have a stair step of curly braces at the bottom. 3 curly braces in a row. Step 5E. Change the players. So if we've won or their turn is over, we want to change to the other player. And in order to do that, we're going to actually use a very common one-liner conditional statement. Does anybody have a hint of what I might be talking about, what it's called, what that structure is called? It's a one-liner conditional statement. Sorry?
Ternary statement?
That's exactly what it is. It's a ternary statement, so we're going to write a ternary statement. Current player equals, and you don't have to use the parentheses. I like to wrap the condition in parentheses just because it makes it a little clearer to people reading the code. Current player, if the current player is equal to 0, right, what do I want to do as my true statement? Yep, I want to do 1, and if it's false, 0. So we're basically toggling, right? We're toggling our player. If we're already player 0, then we're going to toggle it to 1. If we're player 1, we're going to toggle it back to 0. Step 5F. We're going to inform the players whose turn is next so they know. Message dot text content. Message is the element we hijacked last week. And why don't we use some string interpolation, right? Because everybody loves dirty backticks. We're going to use the dirty backtick method. Player $, right? We put our expression, parsing, brackets, whatever you want to call those things. I don't know what they're called, but it's where we type the code. Current player. And in order to get player 1 or 2, what do I have to do to current player? Otherwise, I'm going to get 0 and 1. Yeah, I have to add 1. Your turn. There we go. And that is it. That is our event that we're going to fire off when anybody clicks. So the way the event listeners work, we're going to talk more about event listeners in week 6. We're going to write a whole whack of them. But basically the way they work is when a person performs an event that you've defined, whether it's click, mouse over, scroll, like if you scroll the wheel, anything that occurs in your application, you can even have custom events, right? You can actually write your own events and then trigger your own thing as well. It triggers a function, a callback function. And you can write those anonymously by providing an anonymous function, or you can define a function like we've done here and write all your expressions out inside there, keep it nice and modular and contained somewhere, and then bind it to the click event. So after we've written our wonderful toggle cell, we have it already bound. We bound it a while ago. And the reason we're able to do this is because the way functions work in JavaScript, when the interpreter goes to read the functions that are on the page, it reads the functions first, they get hoisted to the top of the file, and they become available to everything inside the file. Most programming languages work this way. Most programming languages will take whatever functions you define and make it available, even if you define them after you actually attempt to use them. Except for C++. C++ does not support that. If you want to do that, you have to actually declare your functions and then define them later. But you have to declare them. You have to tell them that they exist. You don't have to actually write the definition yet, but you do have to declare them. But in PHP and JavaScript and all those languages, wonderful loosey-goosey languages, we don't have to do that. We can write our function anywhere in our file. And we can see that because we wrote this function called toggle cell, but we call it way earlier than that. Up here when we actually create the, where do we actually create the pieces? Well, here, we call it here in the remove event listener. We're removing an event that doesn't actually exist yet. Somewhere we actually add it. Or did we not write the add event yet? Oh, no, we haven't written it yet. We'll write it below there. But we are removing it, and we're accessing that function already, even though we didn't have it written yet, right? Okay, so now we're on to step 6. Stop talking and giving me my tic-tac-toe board shop. That's what that is. Cells, we're going to iterate through the cells. So remember, we pulled back all the cells with query selector all, that yanks all the cells back. Cells, and we have a few different iterations we can use, but we're going to use for each. That's basically going to iterate through each one of those HTML nodes and perform something on it. And we can tell it what we want to perform. So we're going to use something called a callback function, an anonymous callback function. We can give our callback function an argument. I'm going to call our argument cell. And essentially what's going to happen is as it iterates through all the cells, it's going to take each one of the elements inside there, one at a time, pass it to the function as an argument, and fill this parameter we've called here. You don't have to call it cell, you can call it Bob, you can call it whatever you want, doesn't matter. It's going to fill it, and now we have it available to us inside our function expression. Okay? Joys of callbacks. All right. I'm going to split that apart. And I'm just going to move this down below all that stuff there, because that's where it's going to close. Step 6a. Add an event listener to each cell that will call toggle cell on the click. There's a few different ways we can actually add an event listener. One way is to go cell.onClick and actually call the property and then assign the function to it. The other way, which is more common, is to use the method addEventListener. That method takes 2 arguments. The first argument is the actual event that's occurring, which will be a click event. And then the second argument is the function definition that you want to execute. And this can be a gotcha for new programmers in JavaScript, because most people want to go like this. They want to go toggle cell like that and add the parentheses. The problem is, does anybody have a guess of what will occur if we write toggle cell this way? Yeah.
Toggle cell will try to run with no argument or blank argument.
Yeah, that's true. It will run without a blank argument. There's also a process, like there's a period of when it's going to run versus when our event is going to run, right? It's actually going to call toggle cell, take whatever the return value of toggle cell is, which I don't think we actually have a return value. Well, we do. We have return true or return false. And it's going to pass that to the addEventListener as the callback function. And then callback is going to go, when you click, it's going to go, I'm going to call false. And then it's going to blow up and go, false is not a function, is what it's going to say. So what do I do to this thing so I'm only passing the definition and not calling the actual function? Very quick and easy. Just remove the parentheses. That's it. As soon as I remove the parentheses, I'm actually now just taking toggle cell, the word toggle cell, the definition, and I'm passing the definition to the event listener. I think this is one of those times to definitely open up the console. Oops, I've removed things. Here we go. I'll open up the console here and I'll zoom in a little bit. What's cool is when you define these functions and stuff like that inside the JavaScript file, they become available to you in the console. All the variables that we've defined are now available inside here. So I could type in cells, for example, and it gives me the variable that I defined and all the values inside of it. The cool thing about that is I can now check toggle cell. If I call toggle cell with the parentheses, I wind up calling it as the function itself. I'm actually trying to call the function. It's going to blow up because we didn't provide an event, so it's kind of mad about it. But if I call toggle cell without any parentheses, right? Now I'm not executing that function. Instead, I'm simply reading its function definition. And as you can see, the console spits out all that code we just wrote. because that's exactly what's happening in this event listener. We're literally taking that definition, copying it, handing it off to the event listener. The event listener says, cool. As soon as I hear a click, I'm going to execute those lines of code you just gave me. That's it. That's basically what happens. Clear as mud. All right. Let's do step 7. We're going to reset. Remember our button reset over here. We have the element currently stored in a variable called reset. We're going to add an event listener to it as well. Again, on a click event. But this time, we're going to pass an anonymous function. Anonymous functions are just functions without names, right? They have no name, they have no label. That's what makes it anonymous, right? Sitting in some basement somewhere with a mask on. That's that function. All right. That was weak sauce for sure, but all right. We're going to pass our anonymous function, anonymous. I guess it depends if you're British or not. Like aluminum and aluminium. I love the way they say aluminum. That's awesome. Aluminium. Anyways, I digress. Step 7a, reset the current player. This whole purpose is just basically to take our board back to the initial state of where we started, right? So we set the current player back to 0. We iterate through our cells. We call an anonymous function on them. We're going to take the closing parentheses and the closing closing curly brace and the closing parenthesis. And we're going to paste them down here just above step 7e. Inside there, we're going to grab the text content and we're going to blank it out, right? So we're going to iterate through each one of the cells and basically reset our text content. So now each one of those cells is blank. So it's a clean slate. Next, we're going to rebind our event listener. Toggle cell. Bam. So when they click reset, it's going to wipe the board and rebind the toggle cell. Why do I have to rebind toggle cell when they clear the board? What happens when the whole board is full? What occurs when the whole board is full? Drop. Got it. Anybody else? Yeah?
It says the toggle, like the last person who went, which would be.
Here, I'll help you out a little bit. Say that again? Exactly. So if we have no event listener, we have to rebind it, right? Because it's gone. It's missing. We don't have the event listener, so we need to rebind it on the click event. Now, incidentally, this is probably not the most efficient because if we get the board in this state, where it's only partially full, and they click reset, it will rebind the toggle event to something that's already bound. It doesn't break anything. It will just do it over top. It's not very efficient because we don't need to rebind it, right? It would be better if we could check to see if it's already bound, and if it is, then just leave it alone, right? That would be better, but we're not doing that. All right, step 7e. We're going to reset the H1 to the state that we had originally, which was tick, tack, and toe in capital letters. We're almost done. I hear the sighs. Step 7f, we're going to reset the message. Message.textContent equals player 1, your turn. And then the last step, 176. GameBoard.classList.remove the game over class. And that class is the classes that we add inside HTML when we want to add a styling class, right? game board is a styling class that we have created inside the styles.css file. Class list basically gives us access to an element's styles that are already bound to the element. We're just essentially removing it. Earlier on, we added it, right? That is it. The only problem is even with all of that, I can click, but you'll notice I'm playing on my own, right? I mean, can I lose to myself? Yep. It'd be a lot nicer to have a AI to play against. So I will leave that up to you because I'd like to move on to the other things we have today. If you want to add the AI user, just while the rest of you are typing that out, you can go to the GitHub account, which is posted in Blackboard under the resources, Sean's GitHub account. Under week 3, you can even see my last commit was opponent logic. Open it up, click on the Tic-Tac-Toe folder, go to opponentai.js, and either you can click on the raw, highlight it, and copy it, or you can just try to highlight it and copy it in here. I'll zoom in a little bit and just quickly explain what's basically happening. So we have a function in here called random array element. That function is just a utility that I created to help me out with randomly accessing different parts of an array. We have a function called click and win. All of this logic in here is very simple. It's very basic. I'm not using any objects. There's no prototyping. And that's intentional so that it's easier for you to follow. But the function click and win, basically it will go through, find the first text content it can, and click it if it's available, okay? Based on a win condition. It looks at a win condition. And then I use this thing called setInterval. SetInterval we're going to see quite a bit today. SetInterval is a built-in JavaScript function that will iterate every set number of milliseconds that you define, right? So I've set it to 500. So every half a second, it's going to execute this code that's inside here. Every half a second. And the reason why I did that is because I want the AI to play more like a player, right? The AI, if it just detects when your turn is done and then clicks, I can't really display messaging the way I want to. There's no real feel like you're playing against somebody. SetInterval gives me a little bit more flexibility. Basically what happens is when it executes its code, it checks to see who the current player is. If it's the current player, it takes its turn. It creates 2 arrays, one for the player 1 possible wins and one for the player 2 possible wins. It then iterates through all the win conditions on the board. And it does that same logic we did before where we destructure and store all the indexes and then destructure and store all the cells. We create 2 throwaway variables. Player 1 plays, player 2 plays. And then we iterate through the cells of the win condition. And we basically say, hey, if player 1's piece is here, add 1 to player 1 plays. If player 2's pieces are here, add 1 to player 2's plays. Then we get into our win conditions. If player 2, the AI, has a win condition with 2 pieces in it and a blank piece is left over, it will attempt to win, because it can, right? If it doesn't, then it will check to see if player 1 has 2 pieces in any win condition on the board. And if player 1 has 2 pieces in a win condition, it will stop them. That's its next, driving force there. The last one is the rando. The rando works by basically saying, if you have no pieces in the board, there's no possible win conditions for you, there's no possible win conditions for player 1, randomly put a piece anywhere you want on the board. The only downside to this opponent, it's not strategic, and you can beat it. And once you learn how to beat it, you can beat it every single time. Because it's not smart enough to strategically put a play in and try to complete its own thing. It's really just looking to try to fill one of the win conditions that are available. So that's why I kind of left it aside. You're welcome to go through it, gut it, do whatever you want with it, and create your own opponent. And if you create something cool, please send it to me. I'd love to play your opponent and go against your opponent. The other cool thing about this is it layers on top. So you can create many different types of opponents that you want and just layer them on top of the tic-tac-toe board. And the opponent plays on its own, just like you would if you were coming to the tic-tac-toe board, right? Any questions about the tic-tac-toe game from last week? No? Congratulations, we're caught up. Finally caught up. Only took 3 weeks to catch up on your orientation. That being said, today we're going to do conditionals and loops. Today we're going to do conditionals and loops. Let's go. I don't know. Do you need a break? Or are you good to power through? You want a break? All right, fine. We'll take 15 minutes, and then we'll power through conditionals. Resume. Okay, if you want to go to the weekly lessons, the example we're going to do today, a little simple, not nearly as bad as tic-tac-toe. A little bit more straightforward, and probably I would say a little more practical if you're doing web development, because it kind of fits into that whole idea. So if you want to click onto conditions and loops starter files, download that wherever you want to download it. I'm going to download it to my desktop like usual. And you know the story, Morning Glory. Go ahead and open that up in your IDE. So for me, I'm going to my desktop, clicking on Starter Conditions and Loops. That opens it up there. And then I'm going to open it up over here inside my Chrome tab as well. Oops, no, I need the desktop one, not the complete one. All right. Uh-oh. Is that the desktop one? It is the desktop one. Oh, no. I gave you the completed version. Which is going to make teaching it very difficult. Hold on, let me check and see what happened there. Oh yeah, it's entirely finished. That's fantastic. Yeah, you're all right. Go home. Let me just wipe out everything, and then we'll start from the top. So I guess you get a few extra minutes. So I click fast. So what's your other class today that you guys have? Is that with Rich, or who's it with? Oh, I know Ben, yeah. I really like Ben. He also teaches Java.
He's very sarcastic.
Is he really? He's really funny. I like Ben. When I taught in the summertime, his class was the one just before mine on Friday. So I got to see him all the time. Oh, he's a good guy. We have a good bout of teachers right now, I think, for the most part. Pretty solid. So is it relational databases then?
Advanced.
Big data then, or no? Are you MySQL or Postgres or MySQL? Yes, I did. All right. Do I have anything in any other files? No. Let's styles I add. Do you guys actually look at the styles folder out of curiosity, ever?
Yes.
Oh, are you learning new styles then? Like how to do styles? Because my CSS, full disclosure, is a bag of shit. I have the worst CSS. Yeah. At my job, I don't do CSS. I do back-end development. We have a guy that does CSS, and we call him the CSS ninja. Yeah, he can literally target anything on the page. Doesn't matter what it is, he can get to it. It's fantastic.
I mostly did CSS this summer, so
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm looking here.
Like I pick up little tricks that I try to like do, but that's it. It's not the best though. And I rely heavily on things like flex, box, and yeah, grid and things. Let's see, starter.
Like Sass and less, or is it just normal CSS?
That is the stuff I'm doing is normal, but the stuff I generally do inside our app that we work on at work is Sass.
I haven't actually worked with them, just aware of some of the cool stuff you can do.
Yeah, actually, inside that app I just opened up. If you want to go ahead, it's up now, the proper one, not the completed one. I'll live and download it as well. So I have the proper one on my desktop. Sorry, that's a bit.
Sounds so
It's the angry apple trash can.
angry apple trash can.
It's the angry apple trash can.
Apple trash can says brr.
It's just so mad. I'm gonna do it again. Oh.
Like that's like now to just like walk
Like, oh, God. Get out of here.
It's like miniature explosion.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, open. Open. There we go. We're almost there. Yay! It's working. Well, I mean, it's not working. It's not completed. That's the point of it, though. Incidentally, I didn't know you could do this. That's cool. You can move your tabs
Oh yeah.
inside the inspector. I didn't know you could do that.
So I was like trying to click and I moved it and I was like, oh, that makes it so much easier. Come over here.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know your name. Nathaniel.
I probably emailed you a couple times because I was in England last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's also why you don't
Yeah. So we type inside where I work. We type in Haml. Actually, that's a perfect one. That's Haml, which is like HTML on steroids. Basically, it's instead of having to do open and close blocks, you use tab delimited basically to define where the nesting occurs. And then, but what's really cool is you can embed Ruby right into the Haml. And there's also FAML, which is like a PHP version of Haml. And then there's Pug, which is JavaScript's version of Haml. It's pretty fantastic because it makes writing HTML not a pain in the ass because it's so fast. And then we use Sass for all of our stuff. I don't know. Do I have something with Sass in it? One of these has Sass in them. Yeah, there we go. And Sass uses indenting as well, so this is a child of this, which is fantastic. It makes life really easy when you're developing. It's very, very fast. All right, cool. That is definitely off topic. Let's move to our steps. So if you want to go ahead and open up Index, I'll just explain what we're doing inside this project. Yes, you need to re-download it, the one without the stuff in it. The one that is not complete. I mean, you don't. Like, I had a student last semester. You guys might know him, Wes. Yeah. Wes, like, flat out refused to ever develop during class or follow along. He just wanted to watch me talk, which is a bit unnerving, but it was fine. So if that's all you want to do, you just want to watch me talk, that's totally cool. If you want to partake, then I recommend downloading the new version because it's empty and it just has the steps in it. So it'll be a little better. So while you're doing that, I'll just go over what is in the index file. We're not actually going to add anything to the index file, but I'll kind of explain it a little bit because there might be pieces you haven't seen before. So up here, basically, we're going to build a, I'm just going to move this down just a slight hair down. There we go. We're going to build a product filtering system. So we're going to list all of the products, and then we're going to use two filters to basically reduce them based on price or be able to search them and filter them as we search. Okay? So I've given you two input fields here. One is the range field. This may not work in Firefox. Hopefully it does. But basically, as you move this, the price will change. It will go up as you raise it up, and it will go down as you go down. And it will filter down based on the number of items from less to higher, which might seem illogical a little bit. And then the search field is just a regular input field. You can see it in there with the div ID search. There's a placeholder called search in it. We're going to use that to be able to filter down our products list. Now I've also given you the products list, which is attached here. If you open up the products.js file, you can see the great big massive products list that I've attached on. That was go to Best Buy's website, steal the HTML element, bring it back into Sublime, run regex against it, and rip all the content out of it into a JSON structure. I was pretty proud of myself for that, as opposed to typing it out one by one, which would be painful. Yeah, so we attach that as well. Now, another piece you may not be aware of is this wonderful element right here called template. And template, we're going to explore this a bit more as we go along. The important part of template is it doesn't actually render to the screen. It's like a little chunk of HTML that you get to code out so you can keep your HTML out of your JavaScript, right? But you can use it to hijack it into your JavaScript and create a brand new HTML element using it, right? It's fantastic because it keeps everything nice and modular. It keeps HTML where HTML should be and keeps JavaScript where JavaScript should be. But you don't have to worry about rendering it or it rendering to the screen accidentally because the template element gets completely ignored, okay? But it will be a part of your DOM, which is important because you need to be able to access it later on. You can only access things that are on the DOM, all right? So that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully you guys all have your files down. I'll just talk about the products file. The products file, whoops, that's an interesting character. The products file is a big JSON structure object that I've created. This is what an object looks like. Objects, they're not always just data. They can also contain functions. You can think of an object like a class. It's essentially what it is. Classes have properties and methods attached to them. Same thing, right? In JSON, you have the same idea. Yep. No, I didn't. I wear superhero shirts all the time. I'm a big comic nerd. Yeah, big comic nerd. All right, so I did two groups. I have, for some reason, spaces is set to 4. That's ridiculous. All right, I have clothes and appliances. Like I said, I basically went to Best Buy for appliances and gutted their HTML field and then ran regex and spit it all out into this structure of name, name source, which is the image source, and then the price. And then I did the same thing on a clothing website that had superhero t-shirts. I did the same thing. Ripped out the name, the source, and the price, and created a great big laundry list of products. Could have did it all day long, but does anybody live in Aurelia? No? All right. Did your power go out on Friday, Saturday?
No, I don't live right now.
Oh, you used to? Yeah. So our power went out. We were out for a whole day, and I had this to build. And I was like running out of time because our power didn't come back on until like 12 noon on Saturday, which was crazy. It was out way too long. All right. So anyways, that's basically what our structure looks like. This is our data object. Don't worry too much about it. We are going to talk about JSON structures in week 6, and we'll be looking at JSON and stuff and how we can use it as a powerful data method. All right. The file we actually care about is this wonder file, the conditions and loops JS file. So let's power through this. I want to select an element on the page. I want to select the message element on the page. And I want somebody to help me with the syntax to see how we're going. First of all, I want to choose a variable scope based on the idea that I'm not mutating this element. So I don't have to worry about the variable scope allowing me to mutate. So what scope do I want? Anybody want to give it a go? No? Do you want a hint? Here's a big hint. When I don't need to mutate something, I usually define it as a constant, right? So what is my scoping modifier? That's right, C-O-N-S-T. Const, right? What is the next piece of syntax I need? Const is not good enough. Right, but I need something first. I need a symbol name, right? I need a symbol name. So let's call it message. That's a good idea. Great. Now I need to access the element from the DOM. What is the object that I use in order to access elements from the DOM? Yep, document. Yep. Document is our object. It's like the main thing. Does anybody know the tier above document and what it's called? No. What's that?
Like, you mean after document?
Above, the parent of document. It's one above it. Window. Window's a big one. There's tons of things in Window. There's a whole bunch of like scroll events and stuff like that, widths and things that you can access from Window. Yeah.
There's something higher than window?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think Window is about as high as you go generally. There might be browser, depending on the implementation. But yeah, as far as I know, it's just Window and then document. I will look that up though, because now you've piqued my curiosity. Yeah. All right. What is the method that I'm calling on document in order to grab an element off the DOM?
Query selector?
Yeah, query selector. So dot query selector. Now, how many elements will query selector return?
One.
Just one? Yeah, and which one? The first one. All right. It will return the first instance of what it finds. All right. Somebody open up their index.html field. We want to grab message. What is the selector that I'm typing in here?
By ID.
Yeah.
Message.
Right? So what is the symbol I need then?
Hashtag.
Hashtag. That's right. Hashtag message. And then I'm not going to add a semicolon because we're ripping the Band-Aid off, folks. We don't need semicolons. They're not required anymore in JavaScript. They haven't been required for a while. We don't need them, so let's get in the habit of not using them. Welcome to week 4. No more semicolons.
Not use them?
No, it's totally up to you. If you are married to using semicolons, go for it. I had a guy fight me on the arrow function last year because he didn't like the idea of the arrow function. He thought it was too much magic, and he didn't like it. So he fought me on it. So he wrote all of his functions regularly. The convenience of the arrow function is its scoping. It scopes to itself, which means when you bind things to it, they're as you expect them to be. If you don't use the arrow function, you have to define your function and then call bind this, which is a lot more confusing. And he made tons and tons of mistakes. But anyways, I digress. You can use semicolons if it feels comfortable, or you can embrace JavaScript and dump the semicolon. Yeah. All right. Step 2. We're going to grab the products element on the page. And again, we might as well make it a constant. Now, this doesn't mean that we can't affect the element that we're working with. We can't change its text content or anything like that, because we still can. That's not what this means. The const, what it's basically doing is it's pulling back a reference point to the products element on the page. We're just accessing a reference. And that's what we're storing in that constant variable, is a reference to that element on the page. Then we can do whatever we want. That's all it's storing. If we were going to mutate the value, so if we were going to take message and then grab a different document element and store it in there, we can't do that. We can't change the value. But we can change the object that's currently attached to it. Okay? So we're going to do document, dot query selector, hashtag products. Yeah.
Hashtag products?
Yeah, hashtag products.
I see now. Okay,
Yeah.
It's like IT products.
I like to use lots of IDs because then I get to say hashtag a whole bunch. Yeah. All right. Step 3. We're going to create something brand new that we've never created before. JavaScript's got 3 very cool little messaging systems that it can send to the browser. One is called Alert, and you've probably seen this before. You go to a website, and all of a sudden this thing pops up, and it like gives you a warning or something like that, unless you have it shut off, which you might. Depending on who you are, you might have the alert blocker or something like that. But otherwise, it pops up and gives you a message. Then there's 2 more. There's one called Prompt. Prompt pops up and says, it asks for information. It's looking for you to provide it some sort of information, and then it takes that information and can store it in a variable or use it in some way. And then the last one is called Confirm. Confirm you see often. Usually if you're about to delete something, you click delete, and the thing will pop up and say, are you sure you want to delete that? Because this is a permanent thing, and there's no going back, right? And then you say, okay, right? And so you move on. So it has those 3 things. It has alert, confirm, and prompt. We're going to create a prompt. We're going to call it let name equal prompt. Prompt is a browser API method that exists in your browser. How it actually looks will be different depending on the browser you're working with. It doesn't look the same as in Safari as it does in Chrome or as in Firefox. It's their implementation of how it looks. You can style the prompt that shows up. Can you? Actually, I might be wrong. You might not be able to style the prompt. I think because it's a browser piece, I don't think you actually can access it. It'd be like styling the download. You know, when you click download and it brings down your file manager, it would be like trying to style that. You have no access to that. That is a black box. You don't get to touch that. And obviously for good reason, right? Could you imagine if you could target that thing with JavaScript and stuff? The torment you could do to people? All right, that would be the worst. All right, so we're going to do what is your name? That's all it needs. It just needs some sort of expression in there to fire off, usually a string. This becomes the message that gets displayed to the user. And what's cool, you see I'm using semicolons because we've been doing it all week. What's cool is we can actually test this right now. We can go over to our browser, we can refresh, and there's our prompt, right? The page says, what is your name? And then you can give it your name, get all excited, and then it does nothing because we didn't do anything with it. It's just sitting in that variable and doing absolutely nothing. But remember how I told you, when we define these things, they're available to us in our console, which means the name variable is available to us right now inside our console because we defined it. So if I type in name, I can see the value of name is Sean. You type in name, you can see the value of the name is whatever you typed inside that box. All the dirty little messages you guys typed in there. All right, now we're going to do some conditionals, right? Don't get nervous. Conditionals you've used all the time. You guys have been programming for 2 years. You've probably typed about a bajillion conditionals. And in JavaScript, there's no difference to the syntax of a conditional inside JavaScript than there is in any other language. It's always the same. It's if, right, for the basic conditional, if. And we're going to basically check if the name is filled, right? So we can do if name. If name is nil, undefined, or 0, it will be a false, okay? So we'll do name. We're going to use a logical operator, the double ampersand. Basically, what the double ampersand allows us to do is take condition 1. If condition 1 is true, and condition 2 is true, then we'll execute the if condition, right? So we'll type that in there. So we'll do name.length is greater than 0. And the reason why I'm doing both name and name.length is because in the prompt, if the person clicks cancel, it doesn't send anything back, which means the variable winds up undefined. So I have to check name. And the reason I have to check name is because an undefined variable, if I do name.length, this will blow up because this property actually doesn't exist yet. It doesn't exist until this has a value. Even if it's an empty string, it has to have a value in it. So I have to check to see if this is undefined or false or whatever, which I can just pass name. itself. And name.length is greater than 0, which means they actually put something inside the name, right? Open my curly brace. Oh, my IDE did the wonderful thing where it wraps the whole thing with the curly braces. I love it when it does that. And then we're on to step 3C. Step 3C is change the message content to hello name. Well, we don't want to say hello name. We want to say hello and whatever the person's name is, right? We don't want to actually say the actual name. So we're going to say message. And what property do I need to access to change the text of message? That's exactly it, text content. So we'll grab text content. Is it a method or a property? Right. What separates a method from a property? What are their differences syntactically? That's exactly it, parentheses. That's the only difference. So if I want to assign something to this, yep, I use an equal sign. And we can do this with concatenation, right? I mean, we can go complete old school. Hello plus name. But I mean, we drop semicolons. Let's go back to the dirty backtick. I mean, who doesn't love the dirty backtick? Hello, $ curly braces, name. Woohoo! Let's embrace the ES, the ECMA standard. Did I ever tell you guys that's what it stands for? ECMA. ECMA is the specification that JavaScript goes by. When a browser says we are ES5 compliant, they are saying we are ECMA standard compliant, which means everything that the ECMA specification for 6 says that you must have, they have to have. All the methods defined that have to be available inside the ECMA 6 standard have to be available by Google if they want to include it, or Firefox, or any of them. The interesting thing is, though, they don't have to implement them the same way. They only have to make sure that the parameters are the same and the return value is the same. What happens in between that block is completely up to them. So some browsers are faster at certain things than other browsers just based on their implementations, right? Incidentally, OpenGL is also that way. Your video card has to have the actual methods, but how they implement them is completely up to them. That's why some video cards are better at things than others. All right. Now, we're going to close the condition, which we did here on step 15. And we're moving to step 4A. We're powering along. All right. We're going to use another one of those things. So we have prompt. The next one we're going to use is called confirm. Confirm allows us to basically set a value based on whether or not the person agrees or not. So basically it returns a Boolean for us. We have the ability to create a Boolean. So we're going to say let confirmation equal confirm. And I suppose confirmation could be a const because we're setting the value and we're never going to set it again. So it could have been a const. That would probably be better. But we'll use let. And we just give it a message, just like prompt. Are you here to shop? Right? And then, if they are here to shop, we're going to give them a nice cheery message. All right? If, so we can do this the long way. Right? What's the shorthand way of this? Of that conditional statement? What's the shorthand of this particular part?
Ternary form.
Well, we could do ternary, but unfortunately we have too much content inside, so we're not going to get away with ternary. We can actually get rid of the true, right? Because by default, if confirmation is false, undefined, or null, or 0, this becomes a false statement. So we don't need equals 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 true. We can just rely on the fact that if it contains something that's worth value, then this will execute as a conditional statement. So we can actually dump the equals 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 true. Some people don't like to do that. They like the implicity. They like to be able to say, I know this is doing this particular thing. Me, I'm all about the Let's rock this out as fast as possible. All right. So if the confirmation, we're going to add a new text content message. Only we're going to concatenate it to the current text content. How do I concatenate? What is my key symbol I need? My key operator. Plus. And we're going to use equals so we can cheat, so we don't have to add it back, right? Plus equals. I'm going to put a new line character in, and I'm going to say, welcome to our shop, big spender, with some emphasis. Now I put this curly brace at the bottom, way at the bottom, because we are going to have the alternative, right? So if the person hits cancel, the thing is we want to do something about that as well. Want to demean them a little bit, perhaps. So just under the message, we're going to write this little statement. And make sure you get rid of that extra brace. So you have this kind of structure. So it's if, and then else, right? Syntactically looks the same as everything else, right? As the comment says, otherwise condemn them to hell. So if they ain't here to shop, get out. Message dot text content plus equals. I mean, let's be real nasty. Cool beans, cheapskate. There we go. Nice. They'll never be back. We should publish this to a server and put some SEO on it and see if we get any traffic.
I can't like get anything on this.
I can't click nothing. You have some cool filtering, but that's about it. All right. Now next, step 5. Select and store the nav element, which is just the unordered list. So you can't see it. We're going to create a const nav. And I believe there is some benefits to using const over let or var. I think from a benchmarking perspective, because of how it records to memory, it's actually faster. It creates more efficiency in your application because it's never going to change. So they can landlock the value size in memory, right? They're not having to leave it wide open because you might change it. All right, nav ul. That grabs that for us. Next, we're going to create an array with actually some navigation items. They're not going to have any real key information. If I was going to put actual links in it, I would probably use an object instead of an array. But I'm going to call the first element about us. Second element, our products. And the third element, contact us, which conveniently will be a dead link. In JavaScript, we have multiple iteration tools. I mean multiple. In C++, you don't have multiple. In C++, you have for loops, right? You have while loops, and you have do while loops. And that is it. That's all you get. If you want for each loops, then you have to add on extra things to it, extra libraries in order to use those. A lot of other languages, you usually get a for loop, a while loop, a do while loop, and then you generally get a for each loop so you can iterate through arrays. Most languages give you something like that. In JavaScript, whatever that was, in JavaScript, we have for loops, for each loops, while loops, do while loops, for in loops, and for of loops. We got lots of stuff. We also have map, filter, those are iteratives. Reduce is an iterative, every is an iterative, and fill is an iterative. There is tons and tons and tons of ways to loop through content. They give you every possible thing under the sun to do looping. So we're going to cover just a couple, just a few, right? The rest of them you'll want to look up. We did cover some last week, though, when we took a look at .map and .filter. We did that iteration. Those are iterations. There's one other iteration that is not obvious to most people and can lead to Stack Overflow if not controlled. Does anybody know what that iteration is called? I'll give you a hint. It's when something calls itself.
Recursion.
Recursion, yeah. Recursion is good if controlled. Recursion is bad if you don't control it because it can lead to Stack Overflow, right? And that's where we've called so much, we've blown out the stack, we have no more memory to work with, and yeah, everything goes bad. But we will talk about recursion later on. When we talk about functions next week, we might do something recursively, just to kind of give you you get your feet wet. Have you guys coded in like a recursive function before? No? Yeah, we'll take a look at one. Yeah, we'll walk a tree. That's what we'll do. We'll walk a tree. You're like, what? What's a tree? Yeah, all right. So let's use a for loop. Like any for loop ever, right? We have our sentinel at the beginning. Let I equal 0, right? We have our conditional statement in the middle. If I is less than, and basically I want to iterate through all these nav items. So what number do I want to make sure it's less than? The number of elements, yeah. How do I get the number of elements? Yep, length. And then I plus plus to do our iteration. We can also do plus plus, whoop, plus plus I if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Go in either one. Dealer's choice. All right, let's get rid of that curly brace, and I'm not going to plug it down below because it goes way down. We'll plug it when we need it. All right, so this is a standard iteration, right? You've done these kind of iterations before. For loops are pretty common. We just iterate through, and then when we hit the end of it, it's going to increment and go through the iteration again. Once the condition is met, it will stop, right? And it won't execute. So let's do let nav items. Nope, sorry, we already did that. Let nav item, that's what we want, equals document.create element li. What does create element do for us? Yeah, it creates an element. Exactly. What kind of element? An HTML element, right? That's its whole purpose. It's going to create a document element for us on the page that we can use. In this particular scenario, it's creating a list item for us. All right? You can get it to create a whole bunch of different things. All right. Now we're going to create and store an anchor element. So we're going to create another element now. We're going to call this one nav link. Don't get them confused. Document.create element. And what do you think I need to put between those quotes?
A.
Yep, an A. Now we'll create an anchor link. Actually, it just creates the anchor tag. If we want the link, we have to add an attribute to it to get the link. Which we're going to do next. Nav link. And to add an attribute or change an attribute, we call a method called setAttribute. SetAttribute takes two arguments, sorry. The first one is the attribute you want to set, so href. And then the second one is the value you want to set it with, so hashtag. We're not done. There's no point in having a link on the page if it doesn't have any text, right? Nobody would see it. Nobody would be able to click it. So we're going to add nav link dot text content equals, and how do I get my text content? Let's look at the logic, right? So we're iterating through the nav items, right? How do I get the text content of the particular nav item I'm on? I'll start you. Nav items, yeah, you're on the right track. And then inside these brackets, we're going to add the I, right? Because the I will be iterated each time and incremented for us. So the I will allow us to keep track of our index number. We can use it to reference our nav items index. If you don't like that, you are absolutely going to love for of. For of makes things a lot prettier. Cleans up a lot of this stuff. All right, so that adds the nav links text. Now we're ready to move on. Step 5H, using a single line if condition, and this is not a ternary. Okay, this is a single line if condition. Using a single line if condition, check if the item is our products and add a class of active to it. The way a single line if condition looks is you write if, like you normally would. We're checking nav items and that index number. We're going to check to see if it's equal to our products. And then if it is, instead of adding the curly braces like you normally would, you can either do it in two different ways. Some people prefer to do it on the next line tabbed in. Some people prefer to do it on a single line. I think Ruby developers prefer to do it on the single line because we're so used to writing it that way. So I kind of like doing it that way. So it's navlink.classList .add. Add is a method on class list. And I'm going to add the word active. We're going to add the class active. There is restrictions to single line if conditions, right? The one biggest restriction, you can only have one expression. It can only execute one expression, right? The second you're going to have a second expression, you're going to need some curly braces around it so that you have a block, right? But if you're only executing one expression, you can do it in one line. Then we have step 5. Append the nav link to the nav item. So we're going to take nav item dot append or append child, your choice, and nav link. And step 5J, pretty much the same thing, only this time we're appending to the nav itself. Append child nav item. And then we're ready to finally close our for loop. If everything's golden, pony boy, you can go over and refresh. Hit cancel if you want. Are you here to shop? Cancel. And we get our message, cool beans, cheapskate. And you should be able to see your nav list with my nice styling. My son chose the colors. Said, I like these colors. These are the best colors to go together. I'm not sure I like navy blue and yellow. Not sure how I feel about navy blue and yellow. And then the hover makes it worse when it's pumpkin orange. Yeah, it's got that royal feeling. If it was a bank, it might work, but
It's a little too green.
it is.
The yellow to be there. It's close though.
I'm going to send Virginia my work, and she's going to style it from now on for me. All right, now we're going to create a function, right? We're creating functions in a very traditional way, and I'm doing it on purpose. We're creating functions not necessarily the JavaScript way, the way people are used to doing it in JavaScript. And the only reason is because I believe in creating familiarity between the programming language that you work in, like Java, and this programming language. The syntax for this programming language looks the same as it does in most languages. However, when you're dealing with strict languages, you have to declare your data type, right? So it's a bit different. Like if this was C, you would do car, the name of the method or whatever, my method, right? And then everything inside here would have to be defined, like string arg1, string arg2, int arg3, right? That kind of way. And I think Java does it this way too, right? It's the same idea? Or do you actually have the keyword function? It's this way? Yeah. So inside JavaScript, it's a little closer to what you get in PHP. You have a keyword function. So you have function. That says everything after this is a function. Everything we're doing after this is a function definition. The name of the function, right? Whatever you want to call it, your symbol name. We're going to call it output products. And then we're going to give it some arguments, but we're going to give it optional arguments, right? If I put in price and search, those aren't optional. Those become required, right? It says that in order for me to execute this function, I must pass 2 arguments, one's price, one's search. I have to pass 2 values. But sometimes I don't want to do that, and in this scenario, I don't. I want a default state, because when the page loads, I don't want to have to predefine a price or predefine a search value. So what I can do is define it right inside the parameter definition. And what that basically means is if no price is defined and no search is defined, use these default values. Use null and use an empty string. Then I can write my curly brace, take off the end of it, and we're ready to write out the rest of our function. The first thing I want to do, this whole purpose is to output the products on the page. But we're also going to use it, we're going to make it do double duty. We're going to make it also reduce based on the price and reduce based on the search value. Because of that, we're going to need to call this multiple times, hence why we're turning it into a function, to make it nice and easy for us to call. The thing is, though, is I don't want to just keep appending to the page. Otherwise, I'll wind up with duplicates in the page. So I want to clear the whole products element and then append the products to it. So to do that, we're going to call products L, and we're going to use a property on it called inner HTML, and it's important that you capitalize HTML. If you don't, it doesn't technically exist. Remember, computers are the most literal thing you'll ever meet. And then equals an empty string. And what that's going to do is it's just going to wipe out everything inside the products element. All be gone. And it'll just be an empty element. Now I want to iterate through the products, but the products currently are an object. Okay? And a lot of languages don't make it very simple to iterate through objects, but JavaScript does. JavaScript makes it very simple to iterate through an object. In order to iterate through the object, it starts off like a for loop, right? We have to define a sentinel value or a sentinel variable or like a throwaway variable. I call them throwaway variables because you use it in that scope and then it's gone. You never use it after that, right? So our throwaway variable is called category. And when you're iterating through an object, you use the keyword in, and then you pass it the object, which is called products. Whoops. And it looks like it closed it somewhere. Yeah, it closed it nicely for me. There you go, sorry. Now that's when we iterate through objects. If we want to iterate through an array, we have a bunch of different options. Either we can run the for loop, like we were doing before. We can run a for each callback function. Or the very, very beautiful ES5 syntax, which is for let product, just like the thing above. Only instead of in, we use the keyword of. Products. And because we're iterating through, all this is going to do, when it iterates through the object, it's just returning back the keys. That's all it does. It just returns back the key to us. So we need to provide the key to access the array of products. So, to recap, let category in products returns back the keys inside our products list. Why don't I open up products, move it over here, come over here, maybe, there we go. Let me explain how this is going to work. On the first iteration, through products, it's going to, why does this keep opening with 4 spaces? That is absurd. On the first iteration, it's going to return back the word close as category. We're going to pass that back to products and close as an index. That'll return back this array. Then we're going to iterate through that array, and it's going to return back each one of these elements, each iteration, into product. And product, our throwaway variable, becomes this value the first time, this value the second time, this value the third time, and so on and so forth as we go down. That's how it works. We do a double iteration. Then when it's done with close, it's going to move on to appliances. And then the nested loop is going to do the same thing. It's going to iterate through that list. Cool? Clear as mud? All right. Let's move to step 6. Step 6e, check if the price is null or greater than the prices provided. This is our filtering that we're going to add. So if price equals null, and we're going to use one of these logical operators so that we can compare two conditions, right? So if the price is null or the product.price is greater than the price provided. So basically what's going to happen is this is going to execute regardless, right? As long as that price is null, this will execute, okay? Then it's going to check to see if the product.price is greater than the price that's being provided. This is the thing over here that's going to provide us our price. Based on where this is located, that will define what price we're comparing against, right? And that will be what gets provided in here. Not yet though, because we haven't bound it. All right. Step 6f, create a new regular expression using the search variable and the greedy flag. How many of you have actually used regex before? Yeah? Powerful stuff, right? Absolutely awesome. Regex is very, very powerful because it gives you the ability to interpret user input, right? What they type back. It's how we sanitize phone numbers. It's how we sanitize addresses. It's how we sanitize data generally, or normalize data, right? We need regular expression. It's extremely important. If I can give you any piece of advice, become a regular expression master. It will separate you from other people entirely, knowing how to do regular expression. There was a teacher that used to teach here. He passed away, unfortunately, from pancreatic cancer quite a while ago. He used to teach this course, JavaScript. And I learned under him. His name's Derek, and I worked with him at G-Shift. And he wrote a regular expression that, I kid you not, was, if you were to put each piece on a line based on the word grab, it'd be almost 200 lines, and it was all to detect IP6, like the IP6 IP addresses, because they're so complex. And he wrote this crazy regular expression. It's still sitting in the GSIF platform. So he's got an expression. It's literally an OR separator. He's got an expression to detect IP4, which is like not even a line. And then he's got an OR expression, and then almost 200 lines worth of code just to detect IP6. All regular expression. And it's stupid fast. Regular expression is stupid fast. So we're going to use a little bit of regular expression, not very much. First thing we're going to do is create a variable called search term. We're going to make it equal to a new regular expression. So we're creating an object, right? We're creating a regular expression object. When people say regex, that's generally what they mean. Regex is regular expression. Actually, I can't think of anything else you would mean. It's either regular expression or nothing. All right? The first piece we're going to give it is the thing we want to search against. So we'll type in search, because that's our search term. That's the variable that we defined at the beginning of our function up here, right? So the first time we run this, it's empty. It's not looking for anything. The next argument that it accepts is flags. And you can give it different flags. There's I, which is essentially case insensitive. There's G, which is greedy, which is also case insensitive. So we're going to pass it G. That means it will greedily search through the project, or through the products. Now we're not done. We have this wonderful thing, but we need to actually be able to match it. So in order to match it, we're going to run an if condition. If search is equal to nothing, or, and this is a long expression, product dot name, right? That's grabbing that product name. If I go back to products.js real fast, that's grabbing this. That's what we're accessing there. So product name dot, oops, I closed out my notes here. 1 second, I'll just reopen them. And the computer's acting up. There we go. Recent. Uh-oh. Sorry about this. Give me 1 second. Closed off my notes, so it's going to be kind of hard to follow along without them. I mean, I could wing it, but it's probably not going to be a good thing if I do.
Just go with the notes.
Just go off the cuff. It's going rogue. All right. There we go. Cool. Okay, so step 6H. Nope, we're not done. We need to finish this. So that is product name, and then we're going to make it lowercase. So 2 lowercase, and lowercase, 2 lowercase is a method. Make sure you capitalize the C. I'm pretty sure the word lowercase is 1 word. But for some reason, JavaScript separates it as 2 words. Anyways, so lowercase, and then we're going to call dot match. And inside match, we're going to take this wonderful search term we just built, and we're going to provide it to it. Search term. So it's a bit of a mouthful. I'll extend this a little bit so it's all in one line and you can see it a little easier. And don't forget your opening curly brace at the end of it. Next, we're on step 6H. We're going to clone that product template I showed you in the HTML. Remember how we have that template all created out? We're going to clone it and bring it in as a document element that we can now work with and play with and do whatever we want with it. So to do that, we're going to create a variable called letProductTemplate. We're going to use the document query selector like we would normally, only we're going to target that particular template, which had the hashtag template. And we want to grab the content inside. We don't want the template element itself, because I don't care about it. It's useless anyways. You can't do anything with it because it won't show. I only want the content inside that template element. So I'm going to call dot content, and that will pull the content from inside the element. And then I have it, but I need to turn it into what's known as a document fragment. I need to turn it into a little DOM element that I can work with. To do that, I have to clone it. So I'm going to call .clone node. The issue with clone node, the biggest issue, it will only do the first level, which isn't going to help me when I have elements nested inside that level. I need all of the elements, all through the nesting. So it's kind of neat, though, that it gives you that ability because it runs really fast when it's only grabbing the first element. But if I need to recursively go through and grab all the elements, I have to tell it to do a deep dive by adding the flag true. And then that will recursively go through and grab all the elements from inside that nested template and bring them back. Step 6I. Now we want to select the image, the name, and the product elements in the product template and set them to variables. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if we open up index.html, collapse this, scroll to where we have the template, you can see here that we have an image, an H4 that's currently our product name, and the P tag where we're actually holding out the price itself. So over here, we want to be able to grab those. I need to shrink this so you can see it a little bit alongside. We're going to grab those over here. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to create some variables. So let image equal product template. And what's really cool is query selector is available to you on any HTML node, which means you don't have to run really complex queries just to grab something if you already have the parent element. If you want to grab the children from the parent, you just simply type out the name of the parent, which is product template. That's funny. Yeah, don't grab children. Never mind. Don't grab children. Grab children elements. No, never mind. Anyways, we're going to run query selector and move on from that.
There's just no way to.
Yeah, there's no way we're going to come out of that. on the right side. How do I get this particular element? What's my selector look like? Remember, we're currently in the product class level. We need the child elements that are in there. Anybody want to give it a go? What the selector would look like? What's that? Image. IMG. That's it. Wow. We're going to do this 3 times. Let's just duplicate the same thing. This is the IDE at the best. So in my IDE, if you're using Sublime and you have a Mac, you can highlight one of the words, hit Command D to immediately select the same instance of that word. And I'm going to change that to H4. No, I'm not. I'm going to change the let to name. The selector will be H4. I thought I would get away with that, but I'm not going to. And then the last one will be price. And the selector will be the P tag. So you'll have image, name, and price. All 3 of those elements. And you can chain the query selector, which is kind of cool. So if you wanted to grab other nested elements, say there was a nested element of the P tag. Say there was a span in there that you wanted to access. You can add .query selector to it and then access the span. And it would just keep moving its way through the DOM with your query selector, moving from parent to child, which is pretty handy. All right. Step 6J. Check if the product has the property and then set the property of the element. Okay, well, we're going to use that wonderful single line if condition. So if product.source, which means do you have this attribute that I want to set? And if you do, then image.source will equal product.source. If product.name, then image.alt equals product.name. Because we should have an alt tag, right? Good people will use alt tags. If product.name, then we can add the text content of name equal to product.name. And then last but not least, if product.price, then price.text content equals, we're going to use some wonderful backtick $, another $, with the curly braces this time, product.price, which will make it look like an actual price tag. So just to recap what's happening here, product.source is from our products list, right? That's where we get that from. If I go over here, grab product.js. Sorry, hold on, give me 1 second, I'll get that out of your face there. There we go. So if we look at this, we have a name, right? That's where this is coming from, that name tag's coming from there. We have the source, that's where this one's coming from. Product.source is that source specifically. And price comes from product.price. These things, though, the image, the name, and the price, are the DOM elements that we have on the page. So we're essentially taking our product information and now applying it to the DOM elements that are on the page itself, right? Makes sense, hopefully. All right, we're on step 6K. Yes. Step 6K is append the product template to the product's element. So we're going to take that product template that we hijacked earlier. We've now populated all the content inside that template. Now we need to append that to the product's element on our page. And we're iterating, right? So we're doing this for every single one of these products that are listed here. We're going through those lines of logic, those 15, 16, 20 lines or whatever of logic, each time we pull back a product. So let's do that. So step 6K, we're going to go products, L, right? That's the product element that we selected earlier. We're going to append a child, and it's product template. After that, we get to actually close our first if condition, if you don't already have the curly brace there. Then we have an else statement as well, so we'll add the else statement here on the next line and get rid of that curly brace there. So else. So just to make things nice and efficient, I don't want to like go through this whole thing. If I don't need to, I might as well just continue immediately to the next one and not have to wait. So I'm going to use the keyword continue. And what continue does in an iteration, it basically breaks, it stops the world. It does not move forward through the expressions. It stops and immediately iterates to the next iteration. Like it tells it to go to the next iteration. So it's your way to kind of break out of your loop and go to the next loop. Continue will actually take a parameter as well. So say you have a nested loop, right? And you don't want to target, you don't want to continue out of this one, you want to continue out of the parent loop, then you can pass 1 to it. And if you pass 1 to it, it will now continue the parent loop. If, say, you're nested 3 times in, you can pass a 3 to it and continue on the parent loop, or pass a 2 in, continue on that loop. You have the ability to literally choose which loop you want to continue out of and force the next iteration. It's a great way to break the iteration. Yeah?
Can you explain again how the numbers relate to which loop?
Sure. So if I was to add continue 1, so by default it's 0, which means the current loop I'm in, right? But if I add continue 1, let me just collapse this so we can kind of see it a little better. If I add continue 1, it will iterate this one. Right. So we would literally stop at whatever product we're currently on, right? And we would move to, why does this keep doing this? Stupid thing. We would move to appliances, is what would happen in that scenario. Whereas if this is just continue, and say it's this product that hits the continue, it will just immediately stop doing whatever it's doing and immediately iterate to the next one and go through its logic. Yeah. It's very handy to have continue because it's a way to break through. So in Ruby, we have next, allows us to move to the next iteration. PHP is continue. C++ is continue. They all have a way to break out of the iteration. What's another way you can break completely? Say I just want to get out of it altogether. I don't want to iterate anymore. I literally just want to exit the loop. I'm done. Yep, it's break. There's a keyword called break, and it allows you to just completely exit the loop entirely. Okay? You generally see those in while loops more than you see them in anything else, but yeah. And then we need to close off this else condition. And then we need to close off the function. So you should wind up with a stair step of 4 curly braces at the end there. This continue is literally just me showing you continue because it serves no purpose. It's not going to do a damn thing. It's going to continue anyways. So, but now you know what the word continue does. All right. We have 40 more lines. Do you want to power through them and leave early, or do you want to take a 10-minute break? 10-minute break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and go through the next 40 lines. Run out of time. I can't stand running out of time. We're like, can't get behind again. All right, we just got out of the hole. We got to keep going. Okay, so step 6M. So now we built a function, but the function doesn't do us any good if it just sits there. We need to call it. So calling a function is not difficult, right? We just call the name of the function. If I call it like that, it's not going to work. It's just the function definition, right? In order to execute the function, we got to add some wonderful parentheses. The parentheses is what tells it to actually call it, right? So that's easy enough. Now we're ready to go on to step 7A. You only missed one step.
Yeah.
Add this line.
It's okay. I kind of get to it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, step 7A. Select and store the price range element. Well, we've stored like a bajillion elements at this point. This should be old hat. Price range, document, dot query selector. hashtag price range. See, I love that about the selectors. There's so many IDs involved, I'm pretty sure I could get a Kardashian to code. The next one is const price range value. This feels redundant. I don't know why I'm doing both these things. We could probably make it a lot cleaner than this, but I mean, come on. I had power out for a whole day. Document.query selector, and that one is hashtag price range value. There we go. I'm embracing the lack of semicolons, like 100%. Steve, are you still rocking semicolons?
I've taken them off for the time
Oh,
being.
he's testing the water.
It's bothering me a little bit.
All right, next we're ready to change out the value.text content. What we're doing here is we're actually going to make it that when they move the slider, we change the value underneath. So that way they can tell where they're at. Otherwise, if there's they don't have a clue what's happening, right? Granted, though, the logic with the price range is completely bass-ackwards, as they say. All right. Next, we're ready to add another event listener, but we're going to add this one a little bit differently. We've been using add event listener. We used add event listener in the Tic-Tac-Toe game. We used add event listener when we built the number search game. Did anybody ever take a look at the word phrase game and actually try to build it out? No, I didn't think so. It's like 200 lines ago. It's doubtful that you did. It's a catch-up. If we ever have time at the end of the class, we'll do it. But anyways, again, add event listeners in there. But there is a simple way to add an event listener. You can do price range, and you can actually, instead of adding click and quotes, you can just call the property on it. So there's a event listener called onInput, which is already a property that's built into price range, the element. It's actually built into any node element. That is an input element. And then we're going to make it equal, and this will throw you off a little bit, an anonymous function.
Is input capitalized or not?
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah.
weird.
In fact, if you capitalize it, it won't work. On click, same. So you're probably thinking of inline click events inside HTML, where you can add the on click as an attribute and then provide a JavaScript. And in that scenario, you have a choice. You can either capitalize it, camel case it, or you can either use it as lowercase. But when you're actually accessing the property, it's all lowercase.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to give it function and the opening curly brace. All right, step 7e. Capture the value of the price range or default its value to 10. So we're going to use a ternary statement to do this. So we're going to do price range dot value is going to be equal to price range dot value greater than 0. That's our condition. And we'll wrap that in parentheses so it's a little easier to see. You don't have to wrap the conditions in parentheses. It's completely optional. Just, I find myself, it's a lot easier to glance at it and read, and I can see what the condition is like that, right? But some people don't. Price range dot value. That's our left side of the ternary. So the left side is executed when the ternary is equal to what? When the condition is equal to true, right? And then when it's equal to false, that's the right side of the ternary. So in our scenario, if the price range dot value, so if that slider is greater than 0, then we're going to return back whatever the value is of the slider. Otherwise, we're going to return back the default value of 10. So like $10, essentially. Step 7f. Set the value of the price range text to equal the price range value. All right, so we're going to go price range value, so we're accessing that element, text content equals price range dot value. So make sure you keep track of that because they are different, right? And essentially what that's going to do, if you look just underneath the slider inside the HTML, you'll see $.00. It's going to replace that value with whatever the price range value is. If there is no price range value, it's going to set it to 10. If there is, then it's going to set it to whatever you selected. Step 7G, call the output products and pass it to the price range value. So this is the reason why we made it a function, because every time they make a change, we want to re-output products, which will wipe the products from the thing and update it with the new product list. So we're going to do that. Output products, but we're going to pass it an argument. Remember, output products works without any arguments, but if we pass it an argument, it changes the default value that we gave it, right? So with price, we said its default value was null. Now we're actually going to give it a price. So price range dot value. Oops. And then we can close this whole wonderful event listener. So just to recap, on input is a property of the price range element, okay? Different elements that you select, different node elements that you select from the DOM have different properties. Not all of them have the same property. For example, when I want to grab the value of an input, I have to call .value. When I want to grab the value of text inside, say, a paragraph, I have to call .textContent. So you have to be aware that the properties that you're expecting to be there might not be there. What is a great way to find out what properties an element has available to it? Has something to do with this thing that's open at the bottom of the browser. Yeah, the console. We can console.dir or console.log out that element to the page, and we can go take a look by clicking the little arrow, and it will show us all the things available to it, all the methods. Another place that's really handy when you're trying to find out what properties or functions are available to it is MDN, right? The wonderful internet. Incidentally, my tests that I do, midterms and finals, you have access to the internet for those because you can use MDN. You would in the industry. You can do the same. All right? Okay, let's move on to step 8. Step 8 is select and store the search input field. So now we're going to work with this guy over here. We basically want to capture whatever the person types, and then we're going to filter down the products based on the search term that they gave it. So this, again, we'll use const search input, we'll call it. And again, it's just document.querySelector, hashtag search input. Under step 8b, we're going to do search input.onInput equals function. I want to capture the event this time, so I'm going to add a parameter to it and open the curly brace. And don't get confused, like this argument that we're giving here does not have to be called event. It's just a parameter we're giving the anonymous function because when onInput is fired, it will feed information to the callback function. If we want to get that information and be able to use it, we have to provide a parameter. Otherwise, we have no access to it, right? So when a person actually interacts with the onInput, which onInput fires when they go to change the search value, when they interact with that, I want to be able to capture that information. I want to know what they typed in the search box. I want to know when they typed it, that kind of information. And I can only grab that if I provide the anonymous function an argument. So I'm giving it event as, you don't have to call it event. Like you can call it literally whatever you want. It's just a parameter. It doesn't matter what you call it. You just have to make sure you refer to it as whatever the name is that you called it, right? So you know what? Why don't we change it? We'll call it my freaking parameter. I mean, there's no doubt that that's a made-up word, right? That is not in the JavaScript lexicon of keywords. All right, now we're going to do let search value. Now watch me totally forget to use it. Equals my freaking parameter dot target. And like I just said, I can't use text content to get out the information that's inside the input. What is the property I have to use to access the information in the input box? Remember? So for a div or a paragraph or any text element on the page, it's .textContent, right? But for an input element, it's .value. And that will grab the information that's inside that little box. Then we're going to do an if condition, search value.length is greater than or equal to 3, meaning have they entered 3 or more characters, okay? Because we don't want to just keep calling it over and over again. I mean, you can. You totally can. If you want to call it on one character, you can. It's not going to, bog it down any. But or search value is empty. And the reason why we're doing that is because when they back the word out, we want to replace the product list with the original product list. We don't want to have it still reduced. Step AE. Now we want to capture the price. So let price equal to price range value dot text content. So that's this price right here that we're doing. That's that element right there on our HTML page. Step 8F, we're so close to done. We're going to output the products. Only this time we're going to output it with the current price and the search value. So that way, if they reduce by price and they type in a search value, we're applying both filters. We should have did the same thing inside price. We should have captured the search value and did the same thing. But again, I didn't think about it until after I'd already written it. So now I'm ready to add my parenthesis, or my curly brace, and close it out with my other curly brace. That is it. That is 155 lines of code. If I refresh, let's see if anything blows up. So what is your name? Bobby B. Baby. Okay. Are you here to shop? Hells yeah. Hello, Bobby B. Baby. Welcome to our shop, Big Spender. All right, looks like we are getting some errors based on the image source. Just ignore that. That's nothing we can really do about it. Whatever reason, it's probably because it's not picking up the HTTPS for it, so we're not getting what we want out of it. That's fine though. So now if I go price less than, and I move it up, it's basically filtering by whatever that price is and greater, which I agree with Virginia is completely stupid. It should go in the opposite direction, but whatever. It is as it is. So as we move it up, we're filtering out our items. So it looks like the current one is $2.99. So if I bring this up to just over $2.99, there we go. Now we're down to these items. And then if I bring it up all the way, awesome. We could buy a Breville Barista Express Pump Espresso machine, that's a mouthful, for $569, which to me feels ludicrous. Now, if I bring this all the way back down and I want to do a search, say I want to just find Wonder Woman stuff. There we go. I can type in Wond, or say the Flash, right? You can see it updates our products list based on whatever the search term is. And why don't we do a mixer? I want a mixer. There we go. Probably one of the things that costs a ridiculous amount of money for no reason. I have that one. I have the red one. Yeah. I mean, it makes Thanksgiving way easier when you have a mixer. Yeah.
So many attachments on them.
That's true. It has that little thing at the front, but I've never actually used it.
Oh, pasta maker, all the things.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm never going to make my own pasta. It's just never going to happen.
These days.
There's a lot involved. All right, it's 6:34, which is awesome. I mean, it would have been 6:24 if he didn't want to take a break, but whatever. I'm joking. So let's talk about the lab, because I think that's an important thing. So unfortunately, to be frank, the shitty thing for you guys is you get 2 assignments back to back. But I extended the due dates to make up for the kind of crappiness around it. So if you go to Blackboard and go to where it says Labs, you'll see Lab 1 is currently open. If you click on it and open it up, there's not a lot of information. I put the information under the View rubric. So if you open up the View rubric, it tells you everything you need to know. All the information you need in order to complete the lab is in the starter files. So just like we do every day in class where it's got the step 1, step 2, same thing. You just literally go through the steps and fill out the lab. And then when you're done, you submit it. All right, so these are weighted though. So the HTML page is only worth 5% because it's literally 2 steps and I did 90% of it for you. So it's already done. No errors is worth 10%, so you want to make sure there's no errors out to the console. Now, that being said, if I get an error that's like we just got with the image because of the HTTPS, I won't hold that against you. I'm talking like errors in your logic that cause an error out to the console. That's a little bit different. It must generate a new character. It has to generate a new origin story. And it has to generate the stats table. Now, a lot of this information is already available to you. You can modify it, and I recommend modifying it because I know what my code looks like already. I've read it 100 times. I like it when things are a little different because it gives me a little bit more, I don't know. It's not as annoying. It's not annoying. What's the word I'm looking for? Monotonous. It's not monotonous. And then each step has been completed. So you need to make sure all the steps are completed. So let's take a quick look of what your end product will look like. All right. That's what it looks like. So every time you refresh the page, it changes out this information. So the story of the red alien planet. That's the name of the superhero. Do it again. The bull wizard flame. Do it again. The malicious Mr. Girl. The massive Mr. Flame. That could have turned out really bad. The story of the vile Dr. Britain. Like it just keeps doing it. And basically it's using two groups of text in order to create these wonderful things. A group of adjectives and then two nouns. It has a list of two nouns. And then it creates a different story for, like this one, for example, is a strange insect fell from the ceiling. The insect bit Robert Kane, giving them the power of a spider and turning them into the vile Dr. Britain. The origin story doesn't really fit the name, but whatever. There's 4 different origin stories. You're welcome to write more if you choose to. They're just little blurbs. And if you follow the steps, you'll see how you do it and add in like the different spots, the placeholders and things like that. All right? Yes, Virginia.
What happens to finding a random element when you erase?
The random part for grabbing a random element. So to grab a random element, we have a few different spots we can look at for that. So we'll go to GCS McKinnon, Comp 1073, and we didn't cover accessing random, but we have done it a few times. So the first place we did it was in the number guessing game. Under main.js, there is a way to generate the random number there. That's one place, which you could generate a random index. If you want something a little bit more specific to the arrays themselves, it would be under, there's a couple of different places, but the one place would be week 3, Tic-Tac-Toe, opponent AI, this function right here. That will help you get a random array element, right? That being said, also a quick Google search on how do I grab a random array element will return back almost verbatim that code. Yeah. Yeah. And then also there is underneath week 4, because we didn't get into it, under the Go Fish game that I'm building. Please don't criticize my logic. It's not the best. There's also a few spots in here where I grab random index numbers from arrays as well. So you can use that as well. If you get stuck and you can't go forward, what is your first line of defense? Add what? Add me to GitHub? Yes, exactly. What's the best place to contact me? Is it email or Slack? Slack, exactly. How many of you got my wonderful, like, here's assignment 1 on the weekend so that you can start way in advance? How many of you actually got that message? Okay, then you need to subscribe to the Slack channel because you would have had almost 2 days advance notice. Yeah. So it is worthwhile because I feed the Slack channel all the time because writing announcements in Blackboard is a pain in the butt and it's annoying. So I feed the Slack channel. As soon as I get a whim, I feed the Slack channel. So make sure you're subscribed to the Comp 1073 general channel and the Comp 1073 Tuesday channel. So that way you are definitely getting those updates. Okay, don't go quite yet. We have one more thing. Assignment. This is assignment 1. Assignment 1 is called match. Yeah, mate.
Sean, can I ask you to either remove the GitHub notifications in the channel, like the Comp 1073 Tuesday another channel for announcements? Because like if I turn on the notifications,
Oh,
I'll
right.
always get
Yeah, I
those
will. So
notifications.
that's the app integration that's built into Slack.
Yeah,
Trust me, it's just as annoying for me because I get it 3 times
I know.
every single time I do a GitHub push. So I'll take it out. I'll just remove the application from
Okay,
it.
it's still useful though. Like you can have a separate channel for that, or whatever. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out how to get it to go to. I can put it to the due date channel because that's open as well. The due date is supposed to send you guys a due date notification whenever I add a new due date to Google Calendar, but it's not working. I don't know what's wrong with it. So yeah, but I'll remove the GitHub one. All right, so assignment 1. Let's go through this quickly so Jess can have her class. You're building a match game, just like do you remember the old memory games where you had all the cards all flipped over and then you flip them over and you try to match a pair? That's what you're building. You're building a match game. So there's a bit of a description that talks about playing games is fun, but making games can be funner, right? Requirements. Using what we've learned over the last 4 weeks, including what we'll learn in week 5 and 6, because this isn't due until October 7th, which means you will still have week 5 and 6, which will teach you functions and then events. So you'll have everything you ever need to know. Not to mention, you could currently build this now. Like you could go and build this immediately with the stuff that you have and examples from GitHub. All my examples from GitHub would allow you to build this entirely from scratch. That being said, there's steps, right? It just walks on steps. You just have to, works in steps. You just go through each step and then fill out the steps. Steps are even stubbed for you. So they're a little bit stubbed out so you kind of know what you need, and then you just fill it in, right? Once you're done, you execute it, and if it works, it's working. Yeah.
Basically, the job of the game for the programmer. Because like you like have a design document, and you just follow the steps.
Yeah, exactly. That's essentially what it is. Now, some people don't want to just follow steps because some people want to go ahead and do something else or challenge themselves, or maybe this is simple. That is fine. If you want to completely obliterate all the steps inside the thing, just make sure you meet the requirements and you can write your own match game. I'm totally fine with that. But if you just want kind of a handhold way to go through it, the steps are there, okay? The board must have 26 pairs in total, okay? So 52 cards altogether, essentially a deck. The pairs are made up of 4 sets of ace, king, queen, jack. You know how it goes, right? You don't need spades, hearts, diamonds, or clubs. Like you don't need suits, okay? Each player will attempt to complete a pair on the board. If a pair is completed, the player can go again. Once the board is completed, the winning player is announced. If it's a tie, then the tie is announced. The winning condition is the number of pairs. Whoever has the most number of pairs wins, right? So your instructions. You're going to download the starter files, follow the instructions in each file. There's instructions in the index.html, the main.js, and there are instructions in the styles.css, but it's very clear what you need to do. If you have any difficulty with the styles.css, you can do CSS from MDN, or you can look at CSS from W3 Schools, or you can always contact me and I'll walk you through whatever you don't know. And then you can add your own custom styles. Actually, you have to add your own custom styles to give it a little bit of flair, okay? Please don't burn my retinas out. Taking it further, the maximum you can achieve on this assignment is 80%. That is the max that you can get to following just the basic steps, all right? The last 20% is achieved by completing the take it further section. So it's logic. You guys are in programming. Logic is something you need to constantly be challenged with, right? You can only do so much step and hand holding. At some point, we have to be like, here, sink or swim. So this is a sink or swim moment. It's simple. It's not difficult. Basically, it's resetting the board. It won't be hard, but you need to reset the board. That's essentially all the taking further is, okay? But it's worth 20% of the mark. Submitting your work. Create a GitHub repository and submit the assignment. It is important, cannot stress this enough. If your commit date is after the due date, you will suffer a penalty for the due date, okay? So if you need to work on it or you want to do more stuff to it, what is a good thing to do?
Branch.
Yes, branch. Make a branch and go work in the branch, okay? Don't change, like when you're done and it meets the due date, leave that branch alone. Go make another branch and work on that branch instead. No, any repository, yeah, so it's in there as well about the repository commits. Evaluation is the due date of October 17th or 7th, sorry, by 11:59 p.m. Late submissions are subject to a 5% deduction per day. A 0 will be given if it's more than 7 days late. Actually, the whole thing will disappear. You won't be able to submit after 7 days. Criteria. Completed the index HTML steps is worth 10%. Completed the styles.css steps is worth 20%. The basic steps for the main JS file are obviously worth 40%. They're the heaviest. Completed the take it further task is 20%. And the game works as required is 10%. I don't penalize people if things don't work as bad or as heavy because it's a brand new language you're working with. That being said, there has to be some penalty if it doesn't execute because you're making my life harder. Because now I have to go figure out why it's not executing. So that totals out to 100%. That's it. Any questions about the assignment? No. If you don't have any questions now, please feel free to send me a Slack message or email. Just make sure I know who you are. Add your name and the class that you're in if you're going to send me an email. Okay? Other than that, you're free to go. It's the first time we've ever landed right on time. Yeah.
Is there a function to enforce refresh?
Hold on.